And we're live. Hey everybody, happy Tuesday. Ron will be joining me shortly. He's taking care of a couple things, and Doug will probably be here right around 3 o'clock. Let's see how many people we got here today. Let me get my YouTube running. Looks like I got a raging smirk. Good to see you again. Mr. Smirk actually stopped by on Sunday for our Patriot Soapbox appearance that Doug and I do with Alan Myers, and as we go through the Federalist Papers. How'd you enjoy the show? I think it's a really good format. Alan's a really good host. He does a good job of keeping us from talking over each other too much. And Michelle is here. Well, I didn't know I was going to have to. Hey, Chris. I didn't know I was going to be doing a monologue today. Ron just threw that one on me. I didn't really have anything prepared to talk about. So let's see if I got anything pops up here in the news. I've been putting a lot of time and effort into the Charles, what's his name? Who's the FBI guy that just got arrested? McGonigal, Charles McGonigal. So yeah, I spent a lot of time looking into that. It kind of ties through Albania, and there was bribe money involved with the Chinese energy company CEFC, which it turns out Hunter Biden was working with. And so I think as they were trying to go after Trump, it looks like they caught themselves in a trap. Apparently, originally, the Biden administration or Biden's lawyers in the DOJ had an agreement to not report or to keep all the classified documents secret. And somehow somebody forced their hand by threatening to go public. Now, that was either John Durham or it was the U.S. attorney from Delaware, Weiss. Somebody forced the DOJ's hand, and that's it's looking like this could be a real big deal. If you peel back all the layers, it goes into Ukraine. So I think what they're trying to do by front running the story, they're trying to set a narrative. New York Times last week ran a hit piece on Durham. Was full of a bunch of baloney for any of those who've watched Russiagate. 37 degrees in Pennsylvania. It's a chilly 64 and sunny here in San Diego. Anyways, so what the Democrats, I think, are doing is they're going to try to, get in front of the story. They're going to try to, if Biden goes down, they're going to try to make it for possession of classified documents, because that would be damaging also to President Trump. What they don't want is for us to get what's inside of those classified documents that Biden had, because if it turns out if it's Ukrainian information, that's going to bring down the whole house, and that probably leads up to Obama as well. The shenanigans in the Ukraine have been going on since 2014, when we actually did a illegal coup. See if I can find that for you guys. Fun little 2-minute clip. If you all remember, Victoria Nuland was the number 2 of the State Department, and she was running point on Ukraine. Yeah, here it is. I'm going to play this one for you. Give me 1 second.
From StreamYard. I'm so excited to announce that.
To them 4 times a week. I just think Klitsch going in, he's going to be at that level working for Yatsenyuk. It's just not going to work.
There is a suggestion for Nuland to contact Klitschko directly to play to his top dog sensibilities, while Nuland refers to getting the United Nations involved in a political solution. And that's where the unfortunate comment arises.
I'm obviously not going to comment on private diplomatic conversations, other than to say it was pretty impressive tradecraft. The audio was extremely clear. Hello, how are you? Good to see you. We're here from from America. Would you like some bread?
Well, I might have screwed that up. That might not have been the right video. Basically, it's Victoria Nuland on the phone with Jeffrey Pyatt, who is the U.S. ambassador to Ukraine, for about 2 minutes, talking about which Ukrainians they're going to install after they overthrow the current prime minister, who is not Poroshenko, but the predecessor, the one who's oh goodness, I'm doing terrible on names today. Anyways, long story short, then the Maidan Revolution happened. CIA was most definitely involved in that, and the U.S. has been calling the shots and laundering money through there ever since. So that's kind of the story of Ukraine. When Biden was over there, became the point man the following year, it's basically he was lobbying for Ukrainians to be armed. Obama kept overruling. He did not want to arm the Ukrainians. And now he's over there doing the same thing again. But Dan Bongino calls him a foreign agent for, says he's violating a FARA violation. As the president of the United States, he's still a Ukrainian lobbyist. And of course, his son was there as the bagman. So the story goes, if Hunter Biden, one of Hunter's emails, which this was uncovered by Miranda Devine, she's done a New York Post. She's done a great job covering the story. One of the emails reads basically like a classified document. It's like unlike any other Hunter Biden email, full of details and strategic stuff. Yanukovych, thank you very much, Kathleen. His names. I mean, I'm happy I get them right half the time. Anyways, so it sure looks like that email was one that Hunter Biden sent in 2014, right before he got named to the board on Burisma, or 2015, I think. Long story short, it sure has the appearance that he was selling classified information and using this and saying, hey, look, this is the kind of stuff I get access to, pay me. So I guess that's how the scam worked. Hunter Biden was selling access to his father. And I think we all sort of knew that. But if we've got documented proof. Now, Congress wants to get their hands on these documents, and the DOJ is totally stonewalling them. So we'll see how that plays out. All right, 2:59, Ron. It's time to get in here. We want to take some bets on what time Doug gets here? I'll go with the 3:02. That was me typing in the wrong one. That was not Ron. I'll do it with my own name. Oh, let's see what else we got going on today in the news. Oh, yeah. Biden says he currently views global warming as a greater threat to humanity than nuclear war. Yeah, about that. I got into it with someone on Twitter the other day. Explained to them, they say, how can you not believe in climate change? I go, if you believe in it, it's a religion. If it's science, it's not about beliefs, it's about facts. And that set off a little bit of a rage storm, which I thought was pretty funny. For those of you who don't know, I am absolutely adamantly opposed to all this global warming nonsense. It's one of the biggest money-making scams in history, which what the carbon trading is. What else is in the news? British Columbia decriminalizes heroin, fentanyl, coke, and every other hard drug. Yeah, that'll be interesting. Is it the trafficking or the usage of it? And if you decriminalize it across the world, how's the CIA going to fund itself? I only say that half jokingly. For those of you who don't know, if you've listened to me at all, you've heard me talk about this. The CIA was created in 1947, and it came on it was preceded by the OSS, and the OSS was working with Chiang Kai-shek in China. Chiang Kai-shek was funding himself as with the biggest opium dealers in the world, which is called the Green Gang. When Truman pulled the rug out from Chiang Kai-shek, Mao Zedong took over China and put an end to the opium trading out of China. So they moved it all to Afghanistan, Cambodia, Laos, Vietnam. Oh, all places where the CIA has been involved. Yeah, they've been the biggest drug dealers in the world for quite some time. There's a book I'm reading now, One Nation Under Blackmail, by oh, there's Doug. Bear with me. Let me let him in. And 3:02 is the answer.
It actually showed up right at 3:00, but you didn't notice.
Well, you got a knock louder.
Sent a text.
Oh, well, I ignore text when I'm on the air. It's kind of rude to be looking at my phone.
Yeah, I actually could have gone on about 10 minutes ago, but I blame it all on my wife.
Oh, it would have been nice. Ron tells me at 2:45. He goes, "I got some things to do, so you're gonna have to do a monologue." And of course, I had nothing prepared. So I just
You've gotten used to being thrown to the wolves quickly.
yeah, it's great. Tire tracks all over my back.
Hi, everybody. How you doing?
Got some
Good
really
to
good
see ya.
feed. Got some really good feedback.
Still can't get my good camera to work. The driver has literally disappeared from my computer, and it will not accept it again. It's really weird.
Yeah,
So-
I have the same issue on my my Mac. I can't access the camera on the Windows side. It's gone out on me twice. Yeah, I got some really good feedback from our show on Sunday. A lot of people. Raging Smirk was there. He said it was good. He goes, "It was excellent. The banter was great."
Mhm.
Yeah, that was a fun one.
Alan will be out of town again this Sunday, so it'll be me and both of us if you want to join me.
Is that a
He will
question?
be on the air with me on Saturday, though.
On the radio show, yes.
Yeah. So anyway, all right.
You want to
So-
jump in? You want to jump into the Constitution?
Yeah. Let me find my pocket constitution for this show.
I'm going to pull it up on screen for us.
Hi, everybody. How you doing? 12 whopping degrees here in Illinois, says Joy. Yeah, I remember I visited Wyoming for New Year's Eve. I was there for around 3 or 4 days. And during the day, on New Year's Eve, December 31st, it was a whopping 4 degrees, blistering 4 degrees. And then it was getting like minus 25 or something like that at night. And so my wife and I, we dress in the warmest clothes we own. We go out to the Central Park or whatever in the area there, Jackson Hole, Wyoming, to watch, New Year's. It's about 11:30, and by 11:40, we decided we're watching it from the hotel. So yeah, cold and I don't get along. And I had everything I own warm, and someone says, "Yeah, you look like you were underdressed." Really? What else could I put on? I didn't know if there was any more room for warm clothes. But anyway.
Do you think I should wear flip flops or not when I get that 4-degree weather? I'd actually have to put on some shoes and socks for the
You
first
might
time.
actually have to, I was wearing boots with like 3 pairs of socks.
Yeah, I don't own any anymore. I had pretty good winter clothes when I lived in Lake Tahoe, but no more. Of course, I was going to be, I was fully prepared to spend the rest of my life scuba diving in the Caribbean. Never have to worry about being cold ever again, but that didn't quite work out like I planned.
Raging Smirk, I miss the warm IE, my kids in Riverside, sister-in-law in Temecula. I'm in Marietta, right next to Temecula. And during the summer, it's about 10 degrees hotter than everybody else. And during the winter, it's about 10 degrees colder, but it's a good place to live. But even here, we're getting attacked by the anti-Constitution crazies.
Watch the video today from a guy by the name of Dr. Stephen Epstein. No, sorry, Dr. Robert Epstein, and he's a really RSG, really smart guy. But he's been studying the impact of Google, especially, but other social media, and how many votes they can swing just by impacting search results. And it's pretty depressing when you realize just how badly they've swung elections.
Oh yeah.
I like to think the one number he used with Brexit, they could, he calculated they could swing 400,000 votes, and Brexit passed by 400,000 votes. But yeah, they've been doing it for a number of elections, and they're 100%. You look at the Clinton campaign; it's littered with ex-Google execs. So we do not have free and fair elections from many directions, and big tech is in on it, and something needs to be done.
All right, very good. So we left off wrapping up how the House of Representatives is populated by its representatives, by its Congress critters, whatever you want to call them. Article 1, Section 2, we have the very last 2 sentences and clauses, last 3 clauses in Article 1, Section 2. So for those of you keeping score and playing along. Bases are loaded and nobody's out. And here's what it reads: when vacancies happen in the representation from any state. We're talking about the House of Representatives. Now, let's stop there for a second. Let's once again reacquaint ourselves with the situation. 2 houses of Congress, House of Representatives, United States Senate. We're talking about the House of Representatives. The House of Representatives is explained in Article 1, Section 2, the Senate in Article 1, Section 3. And we're talking about the House. When vacancies happen in the representation from any state, this is whenever somebody dies, resigns, whatever. There is no recall mechanism technically in the Constitution for the House of Representatives. There's one of 3 ways that someone may vacate their seat or have their seat vacated, either through a vacancy that happens due to resignation or death or something like that, or by being voted out at the end of their 2-year term, or within the and I think this comes up in I think Article 1, Section 4 or 5, or they can be expelled from their seat by their fellow members in the House of Representatives. And so we're talking about, though, when vacancies happen from death, resignation, alien abduction, whatever.
Has anyone has anyone ever been expelled?
It's funny. I looked it up before, and I believe it has happened, but I don't remember. It's not common at all. I can, now you've got me thinking about it, because someone asked me that the other day too, and it was a long time ago, and I looked it up. And I believe there has been.
Well, it's funny.
Let's find out. Let's look it up. We have all these devices.
I've got it right here.
Since 1789, the Senate has expelled only 15 members. Of that number, 14 were expelled during the Civil War. Okay, that was, though, by the I'm going to guess that would be a state legislature that did that. As for,
I've got 5 of them.
As for from the House,
you've got 1861, John B. Clark, John W. Reed, and Henry C. Burnett, all Democrats, got expelled.
Yeah, I remembered it wasn't a very big number from the House, so 5 is about what I was thinking. I was thinking 3 or 4, but I'll go with 5.
In 1980, we had a Michael J. Myers, who was a Democrat from Pennsylvania. He was convicted of bribery in the AB scandal.
Mm-hmm.
And in 2002, we should remember this one's James Traficant, Democrat from Ohio. He was convicted on 10 counts, including bribery, conspiracy to defraud the United States, obstruction of justice, corruption, tax evasion, and racketeering, just to name a few. There's been a lot of them. There's been a lot censored.
That's why I'm thinking 3 or 4, because the other 2 are relatively recent, and the other one, 2002. Last time I looked this up, I believe, was in the 1990s. So that's why I was thinking 3 or 4. Okay. Very good.
It's funny you brought this up, just because we just talked about this on Sunday. Under the Articles of Confederation, you could recall your congressman. They served they had a 6-year sentence, but you could recall them at any time. So that's it's interesting that they chose not to do that in the the Constitution.
Okay, let's continue. And then it says, so when vacancies happen, so this is resignation, death, whatever. When vacancies happen in the representation from any state and House of Representatives, the executive authority thereof shall issue writs of election to fill such vacancies. The executive authority would be the governor of the state, and the writs of election would be a special election. So in other words, the governor, and that would be the Secretary of State working with the governor, would issue a special election to have these people, to have that vacancy filled. Notice this is not something that where someone could just be appointed. Why? Because this house belongs to the people. So if somebody's going to fill a vacancy, it's the people. This is the only federal office at the time of the writing of the Constitution that was democratically elected by the people. this was our voice. House of Representatives is we the people's voice in the federal system, in this new thing that they're creating. And so to fill such vacancies, special election, let the people do it. The House of Representatives shall choose, C-H-U-S-E. Don't you love the spelling of choose? Shall choose their speaker and other officers. Notice it doesn't indicate the pool from which that speaker or other officers must come from, including the House of Representatives itself. So it has, and this there has been discussions among the founders in the past also that, yeah, pretty much anybody from the outside could be chosen. But typically, you're going to have the majority party. They're going to have the most votes. They're going to have the majority vote. They're going to get who they want. And typically, not always, but typically it is the majority leader of that party. Now, that said, there was also discussion during the Constitutional Convention. This is way off center here, but I think it bears mentioning that there were actually discussions in the Constitutional Convention when it came to the nomination of judges for the United States Supreme Court, that lawyers or former judges should not be allowed. It should only be non-legal system people that could be on the United States Supreme Court. Why would that be a consideration? Because we're convinced, well, you know, someone's going to take care of the law. They got to be an expert on the law, and the only experts are lawyers and judges. But what is the job of a lawyer and a judge when he was a lawyer? Is to twist the law as much as they can to win for their client. They are masters at, for lack of a better way of putting it, interpreting the law to fit a narrative they desire. They are good at creating doubt and creating confusion when it comes to the law. That's what they do for a living. So why would you want those people to be United States Supreme Court justices? You would want the people who are going to be United States Supreme Court justices not to do that, but to apply the law as it is for no reason other than that's what it says. That was the argument.
That would have been one I wish we would have gone the other direction.
Yeah.
No, it makes perfect sense. It makes perfect sense. I mean, you know, basically what you describe what lawyers do is they lie, they twist, they deceive, and you know that's, but by definition they are licensed to, you know, commit immoral acts. That's what they do for a living, and they do it on behalf of their clients. I don't think they should be able to do that, but that's going to be pretty hard to police. So, given the current system, why in the world would you want one of those people actually to expect someone like that in their background to be able to merit out justice with an even hand?
It's the reason why it was a brilliant foundation for a film, Liar, Liar, where the guy who can't lie is a lawyer. That right there is a fantastic premise for a movie, because it creates all kinds of chaos when a lawyer can't lie, because, well, that's what they do for a living. Remember the scene where the little boy's in class and he's asked what his dad does for a living? He says he's a liar. And she says, "You mean lawyer?" And he says, "Yeah." No.
So I'm gonna take. I'm gonna jump down a rabbit hole on this one.
All right, let's chase a few rabbits.
There's a Frank Herbert, who's the author of Dune, wrote a bunch of other sci-fi books, and I read a bunch of sci-fi as a teenager.
Yeah, I love sci-fi.
One book was called, I think it was might have been the Dasati Experiment. Anyways, long story short, there's 3 main alien races, and their court system is different. Basically, if you are a lawyer on the losing side, you die, and it has some really interesting sociological implications, and that's really what the book's all about. There's one frog-like alien trying to argue to save his own life, and he ends up winning the case. But it made you think about a lot about, you know, what a legal system ought to be or could be, and every single case can change the law.
Lose, you die.
Yeah. You sacrifice your life, and well, it was interesting because each new case in that justice system changes the law, which I know we don't like. That's common law, but anyways, it was a book worth reading, and if I can remember exactly what it is, I will get you a copy because it would be worth reading. Frank Herbert is a great author, not just for entertainment, but he has some very deep sociological questions.
Frank Herbert, the God Makers was a pretty good one too. I'm a fan of that one. But Frank Herbert author of the Dune books, describes the scenery so much though he almost loses the pace of the story, but nonetheless fantastic. Okay. Very
Yeah,
good.
before we move on, something came up in Congress this week. The Republicans are floating a bill to try to expunge Trump's impeachments from the House record. Can they do that? What would be the impact?
Well, that's a good question. It does. Wow, interesting.
And
I would say no, and the reason why is because the president, who has the authorization to give pardons, cannot pardon for if it's regarding an impeachment. So why would Congress have the authority to expunge if the president cannot pardon if it was an impeachment?
Well, you can only pardon if there's a conviction. An impeachment is not a conviction.
This is true, but you cannot pardon the charge either.
But if they're not pardoning it, they're expunging.
Yeah, I would say in the spirit of the fact that impeachment conviction cannot be pardoned, that expungement of an impeachment wouldn't be able to either. That's interesting. That's political party warfare going on there.
Yeah, personally, I would say why bother? He needs to wear those impeachments like a badge of honor. They were ridiculous from the outset.
Yeah,
they were never going to convict. They were political. That needs to go down in history as an example of what not to do. And I hope to God that the Republicans do not do a political impeachment on Biden, for something like the border crisis, although that's an impeachable offense, not applying the laws, because you have no chance of conviction. It is a waste of time.
Well, and it makes him look more like a martyr than anything in the minds of the hard lefties.
The only reason I would say to do it is an impeachment trial against Biden. You would have an awful lot of powers of subpoena, and you might be able to uncover a lot of
discovery might be fun.
Yeah, that it would be worth it for the entertainment value, but again, zero chance of conviction.
Yeah, this is true. All right, very good. When it comes to the Trump impeachments as well, is it kind of reminds me of a saying I like to use, a military thing. You get the most flack when you're over the target. So those attacks with impeachment just tells me he was over the target, that he was exposing things that got them nervous. They were lashing out in all directions, trying to do whatever it took.
Well, that's what that was Ukraine.
Pat Brockman, during the Warren presidency, you mean during the Warren court?
Yeah.
But he's saying the Warren court, the Supreme Court justices didn't have any prior judicial experience. That's fascinating. I have not confirmed something like that. I've never even considered looking into that, but that is, if it's true, that's a fascinating statement. Hello, Kikio. Good to see you, brother. The Warren court, of course, is the court that lives deep in the fiery pits of hell of my heart regarding the Reynolds v. Sims case in 1964. But I digress.
I'm gonna see if I can find that out, because I've never heard that before, and I've read.
I've not heard that before too. That's interesting. And if true, that is a very fascinating. Whether or not it bears anything, it is fascinating. All right. As you're looking, I'm going to say this. The House of Representatives shall choose their speaker and other officers, so it does not have to be a member of the House. So when Matt Gaetz nominated President Trump during the 15 votes for McCarthy, that was totally okay. He could do that. Now, what if, let's say, someone like Trump, Donald J. Trump, became speaker, even though he's not a member of the House? How would it be different? How would his job be different than any other speaker? It wouldn't be any different except for two things. Number one, he couldn't serve on any committees, and number two, his vote would not matter. So he could wield the gavel. He can lead the debates. He can be involved in all of the discussions and all of that, and he could even be involved in the recommendations or in the discussion part of who's going to go into what committee. but he would not be able to vote because as a non-member of Congress, his vote would not matter. It would not be recordable because he's not an actual member of Congress. But I would want him to be speaker, not just because I think he'd be a fantastic debater and lead the debates in the House in a crucial manner that we need, but also it would be very entertaining watching the left run around in circles with their heads exploding. That always puts a smile on my face when the anti-Constitution left. And I don't always just mean Democrats. There's an awful lot of Republicans that fit that bill. I always get a kick out of when they're running around in circles with blood squirting out of their eyes. It's always entertaining for me. But anyway, let's continue. Then it says,
just real quick regarding Pat's comment about the Warren Court.
Mhm.
I just did a quick wiki leaks on every single about 7 of the justices, and the first 7 all came from a job like as an attorney general or a senator or something. I did not find one that had served in a previous judgeship yet. So Pat may be correct on
so
this.
they had prosecutory experience, but they did not have judicial experience.
I didn't get through it because I wanted to pay attention to what you're saying, but it looks like that there may be something to that. So let's.
Okay. Well, very, very, very good piece of information to bring to our attention. Thank you.
God, I love
Pat.
trivia. I love trivia like that, but we'll dig deeper and give you a firm answer next week.
Yeah, so Pat Brockman is quoting Mr. Earl Taylor from the National Center for Constitutional Studies. The NCCS, that's where I get my pocket constitutions, and the National Center for Constitutional Studies was established by Cleon Skousen, which I'm a huge fan of, wrote The Naked Communist, the 5,000-Year Leap. And in the Naked Communist, he's the one that came up with a list of 45 goals, communist goals for the destruction of America. Which all of them are in play and either have been used or are being used at this moment. Cleon Skousen, his climb to fame began with him teaching Constitution classes. I feel a little kinship with him. The difference between me and him is I teach him at restaurants, churches, or in one case, a chiropractor shop. Cleon Skousen used to teach him in his garage. So there's the difference. But anyway, all right, let's continue. The last clause in Article 1, Section 2 says that the House of Representatives shall have the sole power of impeachment. That, for some reason, confuses people because, and we kind of talked about this a little bit a moment ago. When someone is impeached, that does not mean they've been removed from office. Impeachment is the charge, the indictment. So how the House has the power to impeach, to bring the charges, or to indict, but then it still has to go through its trial. Now, in an impeachment for a president, a vice president, a judge, or other officers that required senatorial approval or confirmation, the process, they don't get a jury. Their judge, jury, and executioner, so to speak, is the United States Senate. Now, when we go back to when the Constitution was first written, remember, the U.S. Senate was a different animal. The United States senators represented the state legislatures. They're there with the voice of the states in the legislature. So this was a way for, once again, for the states to have oversight over certain processes. By having the U.S. senators appointed by the state legislatures, allow the state legislatures to have oversight over the legislative process. Treaties are no good until they're ratified by the Senate. The nomination or appointment of officers and judges, and the removal because of them being the court that will hold the hearing for impeachments. So what it's saying here is the House of Representatives has the sole power of impeachment. They can bring the charge. The people, the voice of the people, to say, this guy's messed up. We believe it should be removed. And they charge him. But it's not up to the people who that brought the charges to hold the hearing. That's the other house, which is a dissimilar house. It's different. It's different than the first house because it's populated differently. And if you go back to the story where Jefferson asked George Washington, or why are the two houses of Congress so different? What were you guys thinking? And George Washington uses an example of hot tea. Says, well, the hot tea, that is House of Representatives. When you pull it in the saucer so it can be cooled down for you to sip it, that is the Senate, where cooler heads prevail. So you're going to have the hotter heads in the House bringing on the charges. You've got the U.S. Senate, where a little more experience. They represent the voice of the states, so on and so forth. Cooler heads, they're going to be the ones who are going to hold the hearing. And then if there's a conviction, then removal from office could be the punishment. So there you go. So I just want to make sure you understand. So when it says that House of Representatives has the sole power of impeachment, understand that does not include removal. All that is charging, the indictment. Anything to add, Brady?
Yeah, I was going to say, I was in a conversation with a savvy friend, and I was discussing the Brady Amendment, which is basically getting rid of the national political parties. And he suggests that if you do that, impeachment would be much more likely to succeed, because you would not have people voting on party lines. They'd be voting on the issues.
Well, I think I don't think we could ever get rid of party lines, because even if you were successful to get rid of the parties, the factions would still exist. You're going to have your right, you're going to have a left. They're going to coalesce.
I think you end up with multiple factions.
Well, maybe different degrees of constitutionalism versus anti-constitutionalism, perhaps. Some might be more moderate than others, but I still think you're going to wind up with big government, small government coalitions. And when there's varying degrees, they're still going to align with each other, sort of like the anti-federalists who had a problem with the Federalists. But boy, I tell you what, when the Nationalists through the Federalist Party were on the scene, they were both the Federalists and the Anti-Federalists, the true Federalists and the Anti-Federalists were quick to join forces to stand against the Nationalists of the Federalist Party. And they suddenly found a lot in common, so to speak. And that's what happens. You wind up with, it's like in Austria. And I remember reading this years ago. I don't know if it's still the case. It might be more or less. But in Austria, you had 15 political parties. But in the end, they still coalesced into either bigger government or smaller government groups, coalitions. And that's just the reality of politics. So while I applaud the attempt to get rid of the fangs, the teeth, the sharpness of their idiocy when it comes to the national parties, getting rid of parties or the factions thereof, I don't think is absolutely definitely doable. It goes back to Federalist Paper number 10, which in 2 weeks we will go over on For the Republic, where Madison says, hey, factions is a part of human nature. This is what we do. But the way to control the factions is to make sure that the minority faction is strong enough that the majority faction can't gain power.
Yeah, and that's the whole key. That's the whole key of the Brady Amendment. You're going to have factions, but if you decentralize them, it makes them much harder to corrupt. And that's the key is not to have 1.5 national parties ruling over everything. So that really is the goal, is to decentralize the power structure.
Devil Dog says there was always parties. Well, it's funny because George Washington, there were no parties, but the faction or the disagreements did exist. So in a sense, the parties did exist. While not officially, they weren't organized. There was already, even during the Constitutional Convention, when they weren't even thinking about parties, there was a bigger government, smaller government, kind of attitude. And it's like I tell people, at the time, there were really four different mindsets or factions that existed that were battling for position on the general scene. You had your Federalists, which believe in the Constitution and its original intent and original construction. The Anti-Federalists believed that it was too big of a government that made it dangerous. The Nationalists, who felt that the Constitution, federal government under the Constitution, was too small of a government, and it should be larger, more powerful, more consolidated when it comes to its powers. And then you had the Tories, the loyalists to the English crown, who said, hey, we should have never left the protective umbrella of the British Empire. And then you had other factions that mixed and matched throughout those factions, such as pro-slavery versus anti-slavery. You had, big city, control versus rural control, and so on and so forth. So factions, and that's where, if you were to get rid of the parties, where you would have those many different factions, is you might have two small government groups, but one might believe that, the rural areas should be completely left alone, and the other group might say that there needs to be a certain uniformity from the federal government. I mean, there's going to be those varying ideas and battling opinions.
Well, I think
but political parties are really, we naturally do it.
It doesn't really matter how you sugarcoat it or paint it or what have you. You're really talking about different, belief of how much government, 0 being anarchy, 100 being tyranny, where
Right.
on that sliding vertical scale should you be as a government? And I'm
Yeah, ultimately, what you're saying is it comes down to liberty or tyranny, as you always, and Levin has come to that conclusion. I came to that conclusion, although I don't say it as often as you. You're absolutely right. And liberty and tyranny, one of the other battles that's going on kind of in that, doggy in the window kind of scenario, is also, it comes down to individualism versus collectivism. Individualism leaning in the liberty, and the collectivism leaning towards tyranny.
by definition, they do.
Yeah.
Just out of curiosity, with the benefit of hindsight, if you were there in 1787, which of those 4 main factions would you have been a member of? Because I think I might have been.
Man, that's a tough one.
I think I might have been an anti-federalist.
I probably would have been a Madisonian style federalist, but I totally, looking back, get George Mason.
Yeah, he brilliant man, and he ended up being a lot more correct than we would prefer.
And remember that, like I said, the anti-federalists and the federalists, they wound up working together. For example, George Clinton was a big time anti-federalist. He wound up the vice president of James Madison. So, once again, while they had their differences in the big scheme of things, they were allies.
Doug, do you want to, should we address Devil Dog's comment about the foundation of the Republican Party, or you want to save that for another time so we can move on? Because that could take the rest of the show if we actually go into that.
I can do it real quick.
You do the quick one, and I'll try to keep my mouth shut because I've got thoughts.
Okay. So real quick, the evolution of political parties. So you already had in the Constitutional Convention those 4 groups I was talking about, but really they came down to centralized consolidated government versus a limited government or actual federalism. During Washington's presidency, during his first term, in fact, Alexander Hamilton formed the Federalist Party, which were actually a bunch of nationalists. He should have called it the Nationalist Party, but they would have never gotten a vote because everybody was against nationalism. They loved federalism, so he used that word. So even then, the left was stealing terms for their own usage. And then Jefferson, in response, formed the Republican Party, not the today's Republican Party, but the Jeffersonian Republicans. As time passed, the Federalist Party lost their ability to even win an election. That happened about the same time that Jefferson became president. One of the things that Jefferson did to really seal the fate of the Federalist Party after their disastrous John Adams presidency was in the, for lack of a better way of putting it, the deep state, the interior, the bureaucracy. He fired half of that. He fired the Federalist Party half. They had lost their inside edge. They had retreated to the judicial branch through the midnight judges. So Federalist Party's gone. Now you got the Jeffersonian Republicans are kind of controlling everything, and they're winning. And there's really no opposition. Within that party, opposition rises up. You have a Republican versus a Democratic wing. Andrew Jackson believed that we needed to be more democratic. And so for an election or two, they changed their name to the Democratic Republican Party. The National Republican Party kind of formed out of that. The people were kind of following John Quincy Adams eventually. Now, that said, once Jackson got control of the party during his presidency, they changed their name to the Democratic Party. So the Democratic Party used to be the Jeffersonian Republicans. Now you've got those who believe that the legislature should be the strongest branch, or or that we should be a republic, not a democracy. And so these people now don't have a home anymore. The Whig Party was created by the people who believe the legislature should be the strongest branch. And the problem is most of the people who didn't believe the federal government should have very much power did not go into that party. The Whig Party kind of was a big government party, sort of like the Democrat Party was becoming. And so the independents, the anti-slavery and pro-slavery independents that felt that both parties created too strong a government kind of stayed independent. The Whig Party won a couple elections. There was a battle, but then slavery became the battle within the Whig Party and among the independents. So, and there were a number of anti-slavery independent parties. So, Devil Dog, you're kind of on the right track, that were forming, or they didn't like the Whigs per se, because the Whigs were too big of a government. And in the Whig Party, there were the anti-slavery versus the slavery. And that party was being ripped apart from within. So what wound up happening is the anti-slavery independents and Whigs came together in 1854 to form today's Republican Party, the GOP, the Grand Old Party. And some of the anti-slavery Democrats did jump ship and come over to that Republican Party. And pro-slavery Whigs mostly wound up returning back to the Democratic Party. And that is where the Republican versus Democrat kind of thing started. The thing is, at the time, is the Republican Party, interestingly enough, believed that the federal government should make sure that slavery was taken care of and controlled. And after the war, your Republican Party was really the big government, federal government should punish the states for daring to secede kind of attitude. So we have a big government problem coming out of the Republican Party. Meanwhile, the Democrats, who believe that they should be able to hang on to their individual decisions regarding slavery and other items, were really more of a states' rights party. So if there was a switch between the parties, big government versus small government was the switch. However, we are told there was a racism switch at one time, the Dixiecrats and all that jazz, and that just never happened. But like I said, the big government, small government view of the Constitution and the view of our system did kind of do a switch. Now, that said, from about 1890 until about 1920, both parties were proudly progressive in most of their issues. Although, thanks to Taft, the Republican Party started heading into what we would call today a conservative view of economics. And then with Harding and Calvin Coolidge, while Coolidge had a handful of little progressive chinks in his armor, for the most part, he would be what we would call today conservative, constitutional, whatever. And then during Franklin Delano Roosevelt's presidency, that's when I think we really began to see a separation of the two parties in this big government, small government kind of ideal. That said, elements of the Republican Party have always been big government. They drink from the same trough. The Democrat Party was like the Republicans back during the Progressive era, influenced by the socialists who believed in the Fabians, what they were pushing in Britain. But what happened is, as the Republican Party economically began to kind of leave that socialist idea, they decided that they would concentrate their efforts on the Democratic Party. And so the Democratic Party was really the choice of the Marxists from then on. Not to say that they didn't infiltrate or try to have wield control within the Republican Party, but they concentrated primarily the efforts in the Democrats. Now what we have, some people may call it the uniparty. We have two parties that, when it comes to the machine, really aren't any different. They both drink from the same trough. They both seek to feed the same Leviathan.
It's like that's why I like to say we have a 1.5 party system.
Yeah, but we do have in the Republican Party a segment of that party, maybe we could say a faction in that party. And then there's always battling factions and everything. I'm a firm believer that battling factions exist in all situations. But in the Republican Party, the battling factions are a little more pronounced. And we do see a constitutionalist-minded, small government-minded faction in there. That's the reason why I'm a registered Republican, because of the two parties, there are more Republicans that share my views or as close to my views than the Democrat Party. But to be honest with you, I'm a constitutionalist first. And if a Republican is a dirtbag, I'll call him out too.
Yeah, and that's exactly why I am not registered to a political party. I was once a registered libertarian, but that party has its own issues on the party system. I love libertarians because they're very close to me in terms of ideology. I think what I see is that the Republicans, well, both parties have to cater to their voters to some extent and at least pay lip service to their values. And there are a lot of Republican voters who are very close to my viewpoint and yours, constitutionalist, and that's why you get Republican politicians that we can sometimes tolerate, despite the party itself trying to keep those people out of office.
And in the end, it's not about party as much as it's about human nature. You have, and when I say human nature, we battle with our flesh all the time. To do the wrong thing feels so right. So we sometimes have to battle with ourselves over that kind of thing. And, the greed and the selfishness and the desire for power and all of those things, when presented to someone, often is something someone is willing to grab. And the enemy of good, the enemy of the Constitution, the enemy of liberty, whatever you want to call that enemy, whoever they are, they know this about humanity. They also know that we're easy to train, be it through education, media, entertainment. We're very easy to train. We're so trainable. It kind of reminds me, and it always has. I've been using this example for so long, at least a couple of decades. The second law of thermodynamics, where things that are orderly, when left alone to their own devices, become disorderly, order to disorder. And that's kind of true with anything and everything. So how do you stop that journey from order to disorder? Something must happen. There must be something that stops it and plans, creates, or manipulates to move it back towards order. And if we don't do that, then the move to disorder continues. Gene, Doug, the true conservatives have a biblical worldview, just like the founders. I agree. I think that's a very good statement. If you're a regular attendee of my Constitution classes, Christianity, the foundation of the Creator, natural rights, the natural law, all of that is constantly in what I have to say. I actually have someone who agrees with my value system, but is not necessarily a Christian in one of my classes. And one day in the parking lot, he says to me, Doug, I love you, but sometimes you just get too Christian for me. And it's not that I'm getting too Christian, but the value system that Christianity was, that foundation is an important part of what our system is. That doesn't mean that we want a theocracy. That doesn't mean you have to be a Christian to be able to enjoy the freedom here. But that foundation of virtue is a very Christian thing. I have it's funny because I have a friend of mine who has since passed away. He was kind of a mentor to me. Tim Curlin, he went by Loki online, and he always called himself an agnostic. And one time we were discussing natural rights on a show that we did called The Founding Truth. I'm sure you can still find the old shows on Blog Talk Radio if you were to look hard enough. And I was I had been doing the Constitution stuff my whole life, but I was very new with the true constructionist kind of thing. And one day we're talking about natural rights and God-given rights this and God-given rights that. And I finally said to Loki, I said, hey, man, I thought you were an agnostic. I thought you didn't believe in, God. He says, well, not when it comes to my rights. And but what he's saying is he recognized that our rights are natural, that there is, if not the Christian God, they are divinely dispensated to us. And I don't care if you believe that's some great wiggly worm in the sky, whatever. But our rights are not something that government gives us or can define or can control. Those come to us naturally from whatever nature is, natural rights. And they are a part of the natural order of things. And that is the important thing we have to remember here when we talk about all of this stuff, and also how we need to have a biblical worldview or a virtuous worldview. Benjamin Franklin One of my favorite quotes by him is that only a virtuous people you can be free. Matter of fact, I'm messing up the exact language off the top of my head.
This Constitution was designed for a free and virtuous people. It is fully unsuitable for any other.
Well, that would be more towards John Adams, but you're right. So let me read the actual quote from Benjamin Franklin and John Adams. Only a virtuous people are capable of freedom. As nations become corrupt and vicious, they have more need of masters. Benjamin Franklin. John Adams. Our Constitution was made only for moral and religious people. It is wholly inadequate to the government of any other. Why is that so important? When we have a virtuous society and we have virtuous leaders, we follow the law and we make laws that are within the rule of law, within the natural order of things, so on and so forth. If we are a debauched people, if we are morally depraved, moral depravity has taken over, we're going to pass depraved laws, and we're going to have people who are vicious and not willing to follow it. And then as the people get more vicious, what's government going to need to do? Crack down. Going back to what Benjamin Franklin said about needing, having the more need of masters. So these guys were well aware, brilliant what they were doing. But to get back to Gene's original statement, true conservatives have a biblical worldview, just like the founders. I agree. The word conservatives is an interesting one because I'm asked all the time, well, what are you trying to conserve? And some people don't even like the term conservative, and that's fine. I use it because it's recognizable. People knows generally what it means. But when I use it, I say, well, I know what I'm trying to conserve. I'm trying to conserve the principles of the United States Constitution. That's what I'm trying to conserve.
Well, it's funny because you and I had this conversation when we were looking to name our new initiative, and we called it the Constitution Restoration Society. We don't want to conserve the status quo. We want to restore the Constitution to what it was supposed to be. And so calling somebody, I don't want to conserve anything about this current political system. I want it restored. I want it reverted. And I want a bunch of the stuff that's been put in place just, shredded. Right. So that's, to me, that's not conserving. That's restoration. But do we want to jump into the next section?
Well, real quick, your question, how many uniparty presidents? Well, off the top of my head, for sure, one.
Well,
who was it?
The first uniparty would have been
the first uniparty president. The president, in other words, who did everything he could to make sure he was friendly with both sides.
That goes back quite a ways, Doug.
Oh, it goes back all the way.
Well,
all the way. That's your hint.
Oh, that's George Washington then.
George Washington. He tried to appease Hamilton and Jefferson.
Yeah, he gave in on the wrong issues. No, we talk about the modern day uniparty. I think you're pretty much talking about everyone since LBJ for sure. Maybe even Truman, but before that you had a little bit more autonomy. But you also didn't have the divisiveness of the parties. You could cross the aisle in the House and the Senate a little bit more.
They could find something that they agreed on because what was best for the country was in their minds.
Shall we jump into section 3?
Yeah, we've already gone over that first paragraph. So let's go to the second paragraph. And what's happening here is, remember, the members of the House serve for 2 years. The members of the Senate are serving for 6 years. But they didn't want just every 6 years suddenly have this giant Senate election. Suddenly got a whole new slew of senators. So they decided what they would do is they would break up the Senate into 3 pieces so that every 2 years, a third of the Senate would be up for re-election. So here's how it reads. Immediately after they shall be assembled in consequence of the first election, they shall be divided as equally as may be into 3 classes. The seats of the senators of the first class shall be vacated at the expiration of the 2nd year, of the second class at the expiration of the 4th year, and of the third class at the expiration of the 6th year, so that 1/3 may be chosen every 2nd year. Now, that's important because what it does is it creates a dichotomy where, unlike the House, where a party isn't going to suddenly get total control in some big election, because it's not about party, it's about the states. It's about the states having a voice and all of that. First of all, second of all, we were talking earlier about recalling members of the House. And I got to find this. I wrote it down somewhere, and I can't find it now. But during the Constitutional Convention, there were discussions regarding the states appointing these senators, and that the states must be able to yank them, recall those senators if they believe it was necessary. And based on the conversations, that was the agreement. Now, when I talk to people who are Hamiltonians, say, "Oh no, you can't do that." Well, what's the point of a 6-year term? Well, but they don't go to the original language or the original discussions. They go to case law. And the political belief has dominantly been that senators can't just be recalled. Well, they could when the state legislatures were appointing them. That said, if they're, according to this clause in the Constitution, and this is in brackets because it's changed because of the 17th Amendment, if a vacancy happened, like we were talking about with the House earlier, someone died or resigned or something like that. So with the people, the House of Representatives, the governor would establish a special election. But here we have the state legislatures appointing the members of the U.S. Senate. So what happens if there's a vacancy? It says that if vacancies happen by resignation or otherwise during the recess of the legislature of any state, the executive thereof may make temporary appointments until the next meeting of the legislature, which shall then fill such vacancies. What it's saying is the state legislature fills the vacancy. But if for some reason a vacancy happens in the U.S. Senate at a time when the state legislature is out of session, they're unable to make that appointment, then it's saying, okay, in that case and only in that case does the governor even have a voice. And then he can make a temporary appointment. But the moment they're back in session, they can decide either keep that person or yank them and put in their own person. So it's all about the legislature here. The governor's only role whatsoever is a temporary appointment, just if the situation turns out the legislature is not in session. I think that's key, because that's putting all this, responsibility on the legislatures, not on the executives. Now, I'm writing my script for a new video coming up about the Electoral Count Reform Act. And one of the things it tries to do is take the authorities, the voice of the legislatures, out of the process and give it to the executives, the governor, and the federal government. They're trying to do right today with the Electoral Count Reform Act, which was signed into law December 27th as part of the $1.7 trillion omnibus bill. Should have stood alone as its own bill, but it could not get the Senate support, so they had to squeeze it in the omnibus bill to get it to pass. It was written way back in September by the House. So that's how they get stuff like this in place. But what they're doing is they're trying to eliminate the state legislature's voice as much as possible, because they know, and we know who they are, they know that when the state legislature's voice is louder, their tyranny is at risk. And what we read here is the state legislature, the attitude was they need to be involved as much as possible when it came to the U.S. Senate to fight off tyranny, to create the, let's see, Doug, who decides who goes into which one of those three classes? They decided that at the time after the vote was there was committees set up that would make that decision, who went into each class. And I guess you could say conventions were established for that purpose. I don't know how else to explain it other than that, but it was basically people that were involved with the creation of this. What about John Hanson, first president under the Articles of Confederation? There were 11 presidents under the Articles of Confederation. Actually, there were 9 because 2 of them served twice, one of them being John Hancock. John Hanson was the first president. Very observant devil dog. They served 1 term, but technically they were not executive branch presidents. They were more like a prime minister. They were the president of the Continental Congress, which was a single house.
Because there was no executive branch Yeah, I wanted to touch on the language there about the vacancies,
Mhm.
and when they changed this in the 17th Amendment, they kept the vacancy language very similar.
Yes.
And I'll just read that real quickly. When vacancies happen in the representation of any state in the Senate, the executive authority of such state shall issue writs of election to fill such vacancies, provided that the legislature of any state may empower the executive thereof to make temporary appointments until the people fill the vacancies by election as the legislature may direct. I'm looking forward to going back to this paragraph when we get to the 17th Amendment, but make a mental note that I've got some serious questions on that.
Yeah, it's funny too, because someone had sent me a something from the media. Can't remember if it was you or somebody else. Then in the piece from media, it said that the Constitution doesn't give a provision for filling a vacancy should it occur in the U.S. Senate. And I'm like, no, it does. It's on page such and such of your pocket Constitution. I can't remember who it was that sent it to me, but see, the average person out there, they're reading stuff like that. Oh, that person's the expert. Oh, look, there's no provision, and they just believe it. It's a great example in how they fool us. They do something so silly like that, and nobody thinks it's that big of a deal. But it becomes a big deal when now the politicians are guiding the narrative, and everybody believes it because the media convinced them of it with little pieces like that, rather than looking it up actually in the Constitution and understanding that's not what it actually says, which brings up Frederick Douglass. I opposed the Constitution until I read it. All you got to do is read it. Anyway.
The Idiot's Guide to the Constitution should be required reading.
Yeah.
All right. By the Idiot's Guide, I mean the Constitution itself, because the language is pretty darn crystal clear.
Yeah. All right. What we'll do is we'll pick up next week where we get into the vice president being president of the Senate. I want to spend a little time on that, so I don't want to get started on that with like 2 minutes left. And then we'll wrap up Article 1, Section 3, and probably get through Article 1, Section 4, 5, and 6 next week. Then we'll probably have to save 7 and the beginning of 8 for the following week.
And eight's a long one.
Eight's a long one. It'll take a while. Of course, I don't have a class raising their hand like crazy. So, Doug, I ordered 4 of your books and got them today. Can't wait to start reading them. Oh, cool, Pat. Which ones did you get? I'm curious. But my latest, Repeal Democracy, since you brought that up, is out. And I'm pretty proud of that one. The reason why I was asking which ones you got, Pat, is because I have my own personal favorites, or which ones I think are the best reading. I mean, they're all good. I wrote them. I should think that. But I'll be honest with you, when it comes to the style of writing and the information provided, I think my 2 best books are The 7 Worst Constitutional Liars and Repeal Democracy. When it comes to the educational purpose, 25 Myths, The Basic Constitution, and The Promise of American Liberty are probably my best. But there's Repeal Democracy. And you got the special Constitution Association dinner edition. Yeah, so have you been able to break into it yet? Oh, can't hear you. Nope, still can't hear you. Must have accidentally hit something or lost something or whatever. Well, I'm curious because I want to know if he's had a chance to start reading it yet. But as a matter of fact, Stephanie in the chat and in a lot of our shows, the day she got her, she sent me a text message, showing that she had received it. So now the idea is that I get out there to Michigan sometime this spring or summer to speak, and then I can sign her copy while I'm there. Repeal Democracy, Concepts, okay. Basic Constitution and Promise of American Liberty. Promise of American Liberty, that's my textbook for government. That's a good one. Concepts, so let me tell you about that one real quick. My first book was 25 Myths. The second one was The Basic Constitution, which the Basic Constitution is my handouts for my classes that I do. And after reading those 2 books, people said, love your stuff, but I wish you would have gone deeper into this concept and that concept. That's what Concepts is. It's where I go deeper into concepts that I only lightly covered in my first 2 books. of those, right now, my favorites are, like I said, Seven Worst Constitutional Liars and Repeal Democracy. Those are my personal favorites. Most people tell me that 25 Myths is their favorite. Other people have told me A Promise of American Liberty is their favorite. So, I get various feedback. But Pat, let me know how it goes, what you think, and I don't know where you're at, but wherever it is, make sure to pay attention when I'm in town. And I'll sign them when I'm in the area.
Did I fix my volume?
Oh yeah, your volume is good now. So have you cracked open the book yet?
No, I have not cracked open yet. I got 4 other books I have to finish up first, and it's next on my. It's sitting there. I've got a whole stack, and I keep rearranging the order based on the yours is at the top. I got 4 other books I have to finish, and reading time is. I'm actually trying to make a total lifestyle change and basically shutting down all my electronics at 8 o'clock and cracking open a book at night. I want to go to sleep not on the computer but on a book. So I'm trying to do that. I just got too much of a backlog of reading, and I may have to switch to ebooks.
I have a lot of folks to respond to Pat, who's in Florida. I have a lot of folks who love what I do in Florida. I also have a friend of mine who I've been friends with since the 7th grade who lives in Tampa. And then Andrea Shea King, who's on the Space Coast. She was my radio mentor. So I've got plenty of reasons to be in Florida. I would like to do it in the next year or two. So yeah, let's see if that happens. I'm still reading. I don't get as often to read as I'd like, but I'm definitely enjoying this book. How Alexander Hamilton Screwed Up America. I've also got Ungod, which is next. And I haven't had a chance to crack that one open yet. And then today someone gave me a book because they want to know if it's close to the Constitution. And by the title, I'm pretty sure it isn't, but I'm going to read it to give them feedback. It's called Hologram of Liberty. You'll love the subtitle. The Constitution's Shocking Alliance with Big Government. Sounds like an anti-federalist type of book. So I'm going to be reading that one probably soon too, just to, give her feedback. But that said,
I lied. I've got 3 books I'm reading now.
Oh,
first one is But God.
Okay.
That's the 40 things that happen to you the instant you become a Christian.
Good. That sounds like a good one.
Yeah, that was given to me by the Lady Hamster.
Okay.
We have Miraculous Milestones. And this is about in science, medicine, innovation, and the faith of those who achieve them.
Oh, so interesting.
That's been fascinating. I'm really enjoying that one as well. And just absolutely the best book I've read in a decade, or one of them, by Whitney Webb, One Nation Under Blackmail, Volume 1.
Yeah, I was familiar with you, or knew that you were reading that one.
Yeah, it's about the sordid union between intelligence and organized crime that gave rise to Jeffrey Epstein. This ties so much into the research I've been doing for 20 years. And Whitney Webb has just done an amazing job. I'm going to put together a mind map of all the connections I've drawn over the years with some of the ones she's brought up and all the connections. I'm going to be dangerous when I get this done in about a year. The ability to trace every single connection between CIA, mafia, FBI, politics, big business, etc., the bankings, the offshore banks, all the court decisions, it's all connected. And it's so I'm trying to actually diagram it all out online. That's my major project, and it's going to be fun.
Whitney Webb is one of those people who I've been thinking about trying to get on my radio show, to be honest with you.
So I'm in contact with her, and when I launched the new Hamster Tales channel, she's one of my first 5 interviews, and I will definitely get her to do a radio show with you.
All right, very good. I would be that's exciting. I would love to talk to Whitney Webb. I discovered Whitney Webb before I knew about the book, and was interested in having her. And then once I realized reading that book and learned about that book, I did 2 things. One, I decided I would increase my efforts to get her on the show. And 2, I ordered the book.
Oh, good.
So it's on its way. I haven't gotten it yet.
Yeah, and this is just volume 1. There's a volume 2, which I haven't seen, but
right.
Already I can tell you that there's our country is run by some people who have ethics that are a little bit challenged, to say the least. But
all right, biblical citizenship, says Gene. Michael Haller was a part of the writing of that. Friend of mine. Go enjoy. All right, we'll see you guys next week.
real quick, Gene, I just took the biblical citizenship class. I just did that. I think we finished up like in October, and it is fantastic. And in fact, I even bought the monument for my girlfriend for Christmas. So
I have all the materials, but I have not actually gone through the course, but someone gave me all of their materials from it. But Michael Haller, like I said, is part of that, and he's a professor in Colorado and a friend. All right. Thank you, Pat. Great class. Thank you. All of you, thank you for spending time either live or watching this later. Love you. Appreciate you. United we stand. Combined we kick butt. God bless America, my friends. God bless you. We'll see you next week. I am Douglas V. Gibbs, Mr. Constitution, DouglasVGibbs.com, PoliticalPistachio.com. Hey, at PoliticalPistachio.com, by the way, I wrote an article I'm very proud of last week about Frederick Douglass. Check it out.
I wrote it. I read the article. It is worth checking out. Cheers, everyone.